Imagine a force so powerful it can wipe an entire city off the map in just a few hours. An energy capable of powering the planet for months. Welcome to the terrifying universe of the most destructive hurricanes in history. Right now, somewhere on Earth, a storm is forming, and statistically, it will be more powerful than all those that came before it. But before we get there, let me tell you the story of 9 natural disasters that redefined our understanding of climate chaos. November 1970, Bangladesh. Night falls over the Ganges Delta. Millions of people go to sleep, not knowing that in a few hours, half of them will be gone. Cyclone Bola was not the most powerful ever recorded. Its winds reached only 200 kilometers per hour. But what happened that night remains to this day the deadliest cyclonic disaster in modern history. The government had shut down the radio warning system. No alert, no preparation, just silence before the apocalypse. At high tide, in total darkness, a 6-meter wall of water swept across the Delta Islands. Imagine a 2-story building of water moving at the speed of a train. The bamboo and sheet metal houses offered no resistance. Entire islands were wiped off the map, not damaged, erased. The next morning, survivors discovered an unrecognizable landscape. The bodies of tens of thousands of people floated in contaminated water. Cholera and typhoid quickly followed. The final toll: between 300,000 and 500,000 dead. 500,000 human beings disappeared in a single night. That's more than the population of Miami. More than Venice, Florence, and Pisa combined. And the most tragic part: this catastrophe could have been avoided with a simple functioning warning system. August 2005. New Orleans is about to experience its worst nightmare. Katrina was just a dying tropical storm as it crossed the Gulf of Mexico. Then, in a few hours, it transformed into a Category 5 monster. With winds exceeding 280 kilometers per hour, authorities issued a rare mandatory evacuation order. They even advised those staying behind to write their name and social security number on their thigh with a permanent marker. This was to help identify bodies more easily. New Orleans was built in a natural bowl, with 80% of the surface below sea level. In the 1960s, the US Army built levees to protect the city. They should have been buried 12 meters deep. To save money, they were only sunk to 6 meters. This decision would cost $150 billion and 1,800 lives. When Katrina's storm surge hit, the levees failed within hours. 80% of the city ended up under 3 meters of water. Tens of thousands of people were trapped in an abandoned, flooded metropolis. The Superdome, which sheltered thousands of refugees, turned into hell on Earth. Not enough food, not enough water, not enough security. Rapes, assaults, total chaos. Images, broadcast around the world, showed the impossible. The United States of America, the world's greatest superpower, unable to save its own citizens. Rescue teams marked searched houses with codes. An X with 4 sections: the date, the team, hazards found, and the number of bodies. These markings are still visible today, permanent scars on the walls of New Orleans. Katrina was not even a Category 5 hurricane at the moment of impact. It was a Category 3. Imagine the damage if it had maintained its maximum power. October 2012. A meteorological anomaly was brewing. Hurricane Sandy was a relatively standard Category 3 hurricane when it hit Cuba and Haiti. But what happened next defied all predictions. Unusually warm waters along the US East Coast gave Sandy new strength. Then it merged with a cold air storm coming from the north to create what meteorologists called the Frankenstein storm. The result was the largest storm ever recorded in terms of diameter. Hurricane-force winds stretched across 1,600 kilometers. If this storm had hit Europe, it would have covered the entire territory from Edinburgh to Marseille, from Barcelona to Berlin. Sandy's timing was catastrophically perfect. It made landfall in the middle of the night, at high tide, during a full moon, which produces the highest tides of the year. The 5-meter storm surge traveled 800 kilometers inland. New York, the city that never sleeps, was forced to sleep. The subway, which operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, stopped. Manhattan was plunged into darkness. 233 people died. 650,000 homes were destroyed. 8 million people were without power. $70 billion in damage. But here is the most terrifying detail. If Sandy had turned left instead of right, if it had hit the poor countries of Central America instead of the United States, the death toll would have been absolutely unimaginable. Some storms do not just kill people, they kill entire economies. August 1992. Hurricane Andrew hits Florida with winds of 280 kilometers per hour. Florida sees 88% of all hurricanes that strike the United States. They're used to it. But Andrew was different. One word describes it: carnage. Thousands of homes were literally pulverized. 25,000 mobile homes were reduced to toothpicks. 25,000 people left Florida forever after Andrew. In the Everglades, 30,000 hectares of forest were flattened, changing an entire ecosystem for a generation. In Louisiana, 200 million freshwater fish were killed. 15,000 boats were destroyed. The final cost was $55 billion in current value for a single hurricane. But even Andrew cannot compete with what happened in Europe in 1987. In October 1987, British meteorologist Michael Fish reassured the public on television, saying, "Do not worry, there is no hurricane on the way." A few hours later, winds of 130 kilometers per hour ravaged southern England and northern France. It was not technically a hurricane, but the force was equivalent to a Category 3. 15 million trees were uprooted. So many trees that the global timber market wavered. But here is where it gets really interesting. The storm hit in the middle of the night, shutting down all transportation. The London Stock Exchange could not open. And that day, Wall Street was collapsing in a historic crash. London could not react until the following Monday. That day became Black Monday. More than $4 trillion were wiped from global markets in a few days. Would this have happened without the storm? Impossible to say. But if we attribute even just part of Black Monday to this storm, it becomes by far the most expensive natural disaster in human history. March 2019, Cyclone Idai struck Mozambique. Its winds of 190 kilometers per hour were much weaker than Andrew's. But in a country where the average wage is $10 per week, even a moderate storm becomes apocalyptic. The port city of Beira was virtually erased. Hundreds of thousands of homes were destroyed. More than 2,000 people died. 3 million people were left homeless. Southern Africa was in drought. Dry soil is particularly vulnerable to flooding, and Idai was carrying billions of liters of water. A 4.5-meter storm surge hit a region where much of the territory is below sea level. The floods were so vast they could be seen from space. Then, 6 weeks later, as survivors tried to rebuild, Cyclone Kenneth struck. It was less destructive simply because there was almost nothing left to destroy. 1 year after Idai, more than 100,000 people were still homeless. 9 million had no access to clean water. The official cost was $2 billion. But $2 billion in a country where people earn $10 a week, that is the equivalent of hundreds of billions in a developed economy. May 2008, Cyclone Nargis forms in the Indian Ocean. Indian authorities alert all their neighbors. India moors its boat. Bangladesh urgently harvests its rice. But Myanmar's military junta does nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nargis hits the Irrawaddy Delta with a 5-meter storm surge. 95% of all buildings in the region are destroyed. 90,000 people are killed instantly. 50,000 others are missing and never found. When the death toll reached 140,000, authorities reportedly simply stopped counting. The United Nations offered help. The junta refused. For 2 weeks, while millions of people were dying of hunger, thirst, and disease, Myanmar's leaders blocked international aid. When they finally accepted, a massive earthquake in China delayed relief by several more weeks. The official toll was 138,000 dead. But that is just the figure where they stopped counting. Some estimates go up to 300,000. Nargis proves that a hurricane does not need to be the most powerful to be the deadliest. It is enough for humans to decide to do nothing. November 1998. Hurricane Mitch formed in the heart of the Caribbean. It was a Category 5 monster, with winds of 300 kilometers per hour. Then it slowed down. When it hit Honduras, its winds had decreased to Category 2. Everyone thought they had avoided the worst. Then the rain started. For 3 full days, Mitch dumped up to 2 meters of rain per day in some regions. 2 meters. In 3 days. No place on Earth can withstand that. Landslides swallowed entire villages. Floods 12 meters deep swept away complete communities. Honduras lost 75% of its transportation network, 75% of all its crops. A quarter of its population found themselves homeless. 2 million people were ruined in a few days. The president of Honduras, who was overseeing a growing economy, declared that this single storm had cost his country 50 years of progress. 11,000 people died. Thousands more were missing. Mitch became the deadliest Atlantic hurricane in over 200 years. 25 years later, these countries still suffer the consequences. September 2017. Hurricane Maria heads toward Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a small, densely populated American territory located right in the middle of a hurricane zone. Most of the time, its small size works in its favor. Storms only graze it. But sometimes, luck turns. 2 weeks before Maria, Puerto Rico had just been hit by the tail of Hurricane Irma, a Category 5. Then Maria arrived, another Category 5, this time dead center. The eye of the storm, famous for its eerie calm, but surrounded by the most powerful winds, stayed directly over the island throughout its passage. Then the eye tripled in size, making the storm much more powerful. Puerto Rico is only 56 kilometers wide. Maria's eye was over 80 kilometers across. Some areas received 1 meter of rain in 24 hours. That was 1 million tons of water per square mile, the equivalent of an Olympic swimming pool emptied onto Central Park every 90 seconds for an entire day. When Maria finally left, almost all 3.4 million inhabitants had been affected. The neighboring island of Dominica lost literally everything money could buy. They had to change their entire economy. In Puerto Rico, 3,000 people died. It took months to restore electricity and communications. The cost was $90 billion at minimum. Those few days with Maria probably determined Puerto Rico's fortune for decades to come. In August 1975, Typhoon Nina struck China. China was used to typhoons. Nina's winds were not particularly impressive, 180 kilometers per hour. But on the first day, Nina dumped 1 meter of rain. That is more than the United Kingdom receives in an entire year. Henan Province had hundreds of dams designed to withstand rainfall that only occurs once every 1,000 years. They were nowhere near prepared for what awaited them. Under the incredible weight of all that extra water, 62 dams collapsed. Not cracked, collapsed. Massive walls of water literally wiped entire cities off the map. 12,000 square kilometers of land, an area equivalent to Hawaii, were flooded. More than 30 cities were completely submerged and cut off from the rest of the world. The official toll was 24,000 dead. Some estimates go as high as 1 million. The secrecy of the Chinese state means we will probably never know the true figure. The damage runs into tens, if not hundreds, of billions of dollars. The tragic irony is this: if the dams had not been there, the flooding would have been even worse. Chinese engineers had taken every precaution, but steel and concrete are no match for the raw power of nature. Most of us are fortunate to have never encountered the formidable power of these tropical cyclones. But here is the problem. With rising ocean temperatures around the world, the conditions that create these monsters are constantly improving. Warmer seas mean a longer storm season, stronger cyclones that stay powerful longer, and more storms that spend more time over land, causing more destruction. The 10 hurricanes we just saw could be only the beginning. Current records will fall. It is only a matter of time. Cyclone Olivia in Australia recorded wind gusts of 420 kilometers per hour, faster than a Formula One car. Super Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines reached 315 kilometers per hour in 2013. Cyclone Hyacinth in Reunion dumped 6 meters of rain in 2 weeks. And Hurricane John in 1994 set the longevity record. It lasted 31 days and traveled 13,000 kilometers, entirely at sea. These are terrifying statistics. But the scariest part is that all these records will almost certainly be broken. The question is not whether a more powerful, deadlier, more costly storm will hit. The real question is, when? The next time you hear about a hurricane forming somewhere in the world, remember these stories. Remember Paula, Katrina, Maria. Nature does not negotiate. It does not compromise. and it never forgets to remind us who is really in charge.